we think multi-chain is the future. There's no way to avoid it. But multi-chain is also one of the major sources or attack vectors for data corruption and data duplication and just wrong data. And so you need to have really effective protocols, messaging protocols underneath on the networking layer that are able to bridge these multiple chains. And we're working with Nomad XYZ to try and understand how we can do this best so that everything that's created on one chain is not duplicated, but you have verifiability at the end of the day. So the verifiability is the key aspect for multi-chain. And as long as you have a protocol that enables that, you're good to go.
Alchemy really wants to basically support wherever developers are, so I definitely believe in a multi-chain future as well. So wherever people are building, we should be able to provide the on-ramps and the off-ramps for people to get involved. Me personally, I think bridging is going to be a big topic that we are exploring. Also from the end user perspective, wallets. So for bridging, it's really important that all the data that's being captured across all these different chains can talk to each other, can interact with each other. But also as the user, I don't want to have to think about which network I'm always connecting to, and do I have my assets here or over there? And if I'm having an identity that's being built up on one chain, can I port that over across all the other chains? I think that's one of the promises that we've had, where it's like, you know, we have this blockchain, this public ledger, everything's going to be open and public, but now over time we might have fragmentation because of all these different use cases for different blockchains. So how can we make sure that we also unify that, you know, in the future?
If you think of proliferation as multi-chain, then think of consolidation as a messaging layer between them that unifies the data, so there's no corruption.
Okay, so what do each of you think are the most pressing issues to solve in terms of blockchain data or the availability of data?
I think decentralization in the infrastructure layer is so important, right? We're seeing a lot of centralized service providers kind of come out. I think I personally have talked to some of the largest cloud providers who all have a Web3 strategy right now. And I think it's important for specifically around the community to be involved in governance of the infrastructure layer and really you know, be involved in kind of like how these platforms are governed and progress. And so that's something we're focused on at Ankr, is really enabling that, because infrastructure feeds the rest of all the applications and the dApps and all that.
Yeah, I would also say that kind of with great power comes, or with great ownership comes great responsibility. so one of the big things about blockchain and decentralized world is that users will get to take control back of their data, right? And what does it really mean? It means you get to monetize your data. It means you get to decide who has, whether you want the data to be confidential or anonymous or something else. But that doesn't come easy. So as a very basic example, most of you may be using a password manager of some sort. It's taken me a very long time to get my parents to use a password manager, as easy as it is. So when all of us control all of our data, that is a lot of mental effort on a day-to-day basis. So I don't know if we'll ever reach the point where all of our data is fully decentralized, maybe in a couple 100 years, but that's way far into the future. But I think one of the biggest challenges isn't going to be just making it accessible to developers, but primarily educating the users that they're in control and how much effort they actually have to put into controlling it and deciding who has access to what parts of it and in what fashion.
I agree to a lot of the points that Daniel made here. I think teaching developers how to use the API and how to use the queries is really important, because it's billions of rows and it puts a lot of infrastructure pressure for every query. So optimized queries are the way to go. The other thing that I think is important is not having personally identifiable information or personal sensitive information on chain, and making sure that if it's being accessed, that there's an obfuscation layer for this, some sort of privacy layer for any such data that might be accidentally put on chain, because these are sensitive details and they have real world consequences. So yeah, security and privacy along with the education, I think is really critically important.
Speaking of data and education, I remember this funny story of one of my friends. He was doing a thesis project as an art major, but he wanted to do like a technical website kind of a thing. And what he explored was he made a website where you could trade your personal information for game points on the website, and he just wanted to see how willing are people to just give up their personal information for this made up point system. And a lot of people actually interacted with this site, to get the points. So I think there definitely is a role for all of us to play in educating the developers who are gaining access to this data and then creating products to make sure that they know how to behave with it ethically, but also for the users to know here's what you're trading when you sign a message or potentially reveal some information about yourself. It's going on chain, it's going to be there forever. How can you manage all of that? So yeah, that's something I care about a lot.
Don't paste your private key on chain.
Okay, so what does the future look like? Scaling. I mean, we're seeing tons more dApps. There's 15,000 people here. What does it look like? Where are we going?
Okay, so to touch back on some of the topics I was talking about earlier, that everyone is going to need to index and process their own data based on their own app's needs. I think where the future is going is all node infrastructure is going to eventually become truly trustless and permissionless, and whatever RPC request that you make to get data for your dApp is going to be, you can count on its data integrity, but to some degree you're going to have to pull all of it locally, or whatever subset of on-chain data you'll need locally, and then manage it yourself. So I can see a lot of developers becoming more experienced at doing customized indexing or customized processing, because there's a lot of cool projects out there like homomorphic encryption, where you can do, let's say you can do multi-party compute, never have access to the data, but that can only go so far, and only when the use case and the data is very well known ahead of time. So over time, I think all developers will be taught to customize it themselves.
Yeah, so I think one of the big issues is that when you build dApps and you're pulling a lot of data at scale, it can get very expensive, especially on centralized platforms. And so we've seen, platforms that have paid enormous amounts to centralized service providers that have wanted to move over to a decentralized system just because it's cheaper, and the more the community is involved in that. And I think that's going to be a really important thing as we've seen traffic explode, that dApps and different protocols are looking at different options for that.
The verification aspect is critical. As we progressively decentralize, we find that more and more sources are available, but is there a way to verify whether those sources are true or whether they're playing with each other to obfuscate the data? That's a certain possibility. So there needs to be mechanisms that we employ within the network or within the node infrastructure layer, in the distributed set of nodes, that we are able to find whether any sort of malaction has been performed by any node operator, right? And so this verification process has to be really well done. And we are using a delegated proof of stake with a distributed set of validators to do this. And the continuation of the chain requires that every piece of data that's created on chain and then parsed is verified before it's ready for query. And this should be critical.
So how about data that's not created on chain? Again, let's say we go get our driving license at some state, right? Are we just gonna always trust the DMV of our local DMV that this is it, and they submit it on chain? Who's gonna verify it?
I think that's why decentralization is important, right? We need people in the community checking other things. We need different service or different node providers adding this data, and the community needs to understand this and see these tools. The community shouldn't just be trusting one centralized service provider for all this data. Like there needs to be like the community involved in governance and checking things and checking that there's not malicious nodes on the platform, or maybe the RPC provider is doing front running, or there's so many issues that can come up through the centralization. So I think it's time we've kind of scaled to a point where we have so much more traffic. Like Ankr saw 20x growth in 2021 on our RPC endpoints, which is incredible. A lot from emerging markets, and that like Pocket said, there's a lot of responsibility with that.
Oracles. Oracles are the way to go. Like as many oracles as possible, with the different coordination mechanisms between oracles to make sure that each of them have the right data. And because oracles get off-chain data on-chain, it's really important that, like for example, if they're making commits, that there's a second party that's verifying them. So trust but verify for off-chain data, and have oracles that are trustworthy and like they're up and running.
I just want to add a point. Like, I think Vitalik recently wrote a piece about soul-bound tokens, and this is kind of a different perspective here, where it's like more about individual identity and reputation on chain. There's this interesting use case of NFTs where if you make it such that the NFT can't actually be traded once it's in that person's wallet, you can actually imagine using these NFTs over time to kind of track off-chain contributions, work that you've done. So maybe the DMV will actually, adopt some kind of these types of non-transferable NFTs, and they'll give you, your, I guess, license, and then they, as an institution that the community hopefully verifies and says, hey, we do trust the DMV, they can give a stamp and say, yes, this is a real driver's license that this person has. So I think stuff like that is really interesting. And then also with regards to the original question of like the challenges of scaling when it comes to like a lot of data being accumulated, one of the things that I've found really pleasant as a developer is having the ability to actually get notified when something happens on the blockchain without me having to like pull for it or watch for it all the time. And so one of my favorite features that I've used at Alchemy is the Alchemy Notify webhook system. So you can basically put in like a wallet address, and then we'll let you know whenever any activity happens, and you can filter by certain types of activity. And then also like gas price notifications, things like that. So I think features like that will also be really important for developers and users as the amount of data scales. We need to be able to get to the data that we need really fast.
So we got 3 minutes left. So who has the oldest nodes, and whose data is it? The oldest archive nodes.
Ethereum?
Who has the oldest archival
Who
nodes?
has the oldest archive nodes?
In terms of a node provider or the
Infura?
chain?
Who can provide the oldest analytics for state history?
Pocket network.
State changes, that is.
I mean, I don't know how to answer that. I think we have nodes that have been running since like 2017, but I'm sure they, that. I don't know. They all had all the blocks.
The computer on which the Genesis block was mined, whoever's that is, Satoshi.
Yeah, I don't think we have a node from like 2015 that's running right now.
Well, yeah, so at Pocket Network, we don't know who has the oldest node. It's fully decentralized. We don't run our own nodes. So someone out there is running Pocket validators, or is running Ethereum archival nodes, or just Ethereum nodes behind their Pocket nodes. So it's really up to us. It's up to the community, kind of true progressive decentralization to let us, basically what it does, it lets us decide in a decentralized manner what the oldest node should really be.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the answer to the original question is, but another favorite thing that another good thing that I enjoy about Alchemy is that in our free tier, you have access to archive nodes. So, if you wanted to explore for yourself, you totally can. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at time. Thank you, everyone. So this has been a chat about data is the foundation for dApps, and we're all at ETHDenver on Saturday night.